The Romans occupied Britain as well as most of Europe and Africa. This was practically all the known world at that time. The Romans used maps as a practical aid to the journeys of their officials and the campaigns of their legions. The Putinger table was such a map and portrayed both human and natural features. Its main purpose, however, was to show roads and distances. But the Romans were not the first to map their world. Lost in the sands of time, almost 4,000 years ago, the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia used clay tablets to depict towns, villages, and irrigation canals. Pre-literate islanders of the Pacific created stick charts. Ribs of palm leaves indicated distance and direction, while shells showed islands and landmarks. During the 4th century BC, Eratosthenes scientifically calculated the circumference of the Earth and realized the need for a grid reference system which would enable places to be located on the map. Two centuries earlier, Claudius Ptolemy produced his famous geography, and Copernicus proved the fact that the Earth goes round the Sun, rotating on its own axis. In the Middle Ages, schematic TO maps divided the world into just 3 areas: Asia, Africa, and Europe, whilst ornate Mappae Mundi of the same period demonstrate a contrasting approach to cartography. The Spanish and Portuguese, using their seafaring knowledge, produced specialized maps called Ptolan charts. Knowledge of the globe advanced rapidly during the Renaissance period. For example, Sebastian Cabot mapped the eastern coast of Canada. And Christopher Columbus, in 1492, trying to sail to India, discovered America. Gerhardus Mercator, a Flemish geographer, made many vital contributions to cartography, including his famous map projection, which made it possible for navigators to plot bearings in a straight line. Slowly, the world as it is known today took shape. Islands found and coastlines encountered on voyages of discovery were plotted. Concurrently, Britain's Tudor cartographers were also busy. Many fine and ornate maps were produced by private endeavour, such as the County Atlas of England and Wales, produced in 1579 by Christopher Saxton. The Jacobite Rebellion of 1745 brought about sketchy surveys of the Scottish Highlands, and in 1790, Major General William Roy emphasised the military need for accurate ground surveys. Consequently, a national survey was initiated. Priority was given to the south coast because of the possibility of war with France. From these beginnings was to emerge the present-day Ordnance Survey. The first 1-inch series Ordnance Survey maps were produced between 1801 and 1875. These were the initial steps in making Britain one of the best mapped countries in the world. Britain has changed immensely since then, and so have maps. What is happening today? Maps are made for many purposes, and a multitude of different types of people use them. Information on maps is selected and then portrayed graphically by cartographers. A map may be considered good if it successfully achieves the purpose for which it was designed. This program concentrates mainly on maps which show how to get to and from different places. 4 cartographic principles are identified. Data selection, the subject matter, what to put on the map. Classification, how to put that data into groups. Generalization, how to simplify the ground pattern to fit the space on the map. And symbolization, the design of effective symbols. These 4 principles are dependent on scale and purpose. Maps are very different one from another. Even the familiar weather maps on TV have followed these principles. Data has been selected. It has been generalized, made simpler, and different types of symbols have been used effectively, some pictorial, some conventional. Newspaper weather maps tend to be conventional. Note the symbology. Lines of equal pressure called isobars, warm and cold front symbols, and so on. The daily map issued by the Met Office is different again, combining input from space imagery and computer analysis. Partly from these documents, the many different TV maps are made. Weather forecasts are usually reasonably accurate. Data comes from a national network of meteorological stations. It is collected centrally, collated, and computerized. This local weather station can measure rainfall, wind and air pressure, as well as sunshine hours and intensity. Space satellites are not all spies. Meteosat, for example, in orbit above the equator, is used a great deal for weather forecasting in Britain. The Met Office also uses high-altitude balloons to help study the upper atmosphere. Weather forecasts are really important for some people's livelihood. Fishermen and others going to sea. Farmers working on the land. And of course, they are important to holidaymakers. Motorists need to refer to maps to help them decide where to go and the best way to get there. A map gives specific information about routes, enabling choices to be made, the type of road, whether to go by motorway, which junction to turn off at. Where to take a rest and get refreshments, where to repair the car and to fill up with petrol. The motorist is not always concerned with time and distance. He may in fact wish to avoid towns and take a scenic route. Whether he wants the shortest or prettiest route, the map helps him to choose. A specialized road map would be an ideal map for this purpose. This particular series covers Britain in just 5 sheets. Milton Keynes is a rapidly growing new town. Several map publishers produce maps of the area. Note, however, the differences between them, even though they are of approximately the same scale and publication date. This demonstrates a dilemma facing the cartographer: how to keep up to date. Should a new road be drawn in whilst it's being built or after its completion? Well, it's an insoluble problem. Either way, the map can be misleading. To digress here, the use of aerial photography to gather data for mapping has been used extensively since World War II. Complex stereographic equipment is used to extract information from the photographs, a process continued into the space age. Orbiting satellites photograph the Earth every 18 days, transmitting back a continuous stream of data. Each photo covers hundreds of square miles of often otherwise inaccessible parts of the Earth's surface. The pilot of this light aircraft can successfully use a topographic map. However, another type of map is needed by the 747 pilot, flying at 30,000 feet. Here he uses an aeronautical chart which gives simplified land detail plus specialized flight information such as radio frequencies. On takeoff and landing, the same pilot needs a larger scale map showing rather more land detail, again overlaid with specialist symbols such as runways, altitudes and approach zones. These maps or charts are subject to international agreements, global cooperation being essential for reliability and safety. The military also travel great distances. In Britain, they continue to be a major impetus for map making. They have their own particular requirements, enabling them to deploy forces to reach targets from the air, on the ground and by sea. Shipping uses navigation charts at a scale dependent on their speed and their course. Their main ingredient, rather obviously, is the depth of water. But other specialized information is required. Hidden dangers such as rocks and wrecks must be highlighted, their position and depth below the surface clearly indicated. The navigator also needs to locate the position of surface buoys and the correct identity of friendly guiding lighthouses. Again, as with aeronautical charts, international conventions and agreements apply. Regular, often weekly, updating and amending of charts is essential. Smaller ships and weekend sailors need charts of harbours and estuaries. The chart required is of a larger scale, showing moorings, jetties and signal lights. Note, however, the comparative lack of detail on the landward side. Such landward detail is required, however, by the town traveller. He needs to know where to stay, where to park his car, and the location of and routes to specific parts of the city. Much of the information shown on town maps is based on large-scale ordnance survey plans, where positions have been determined by detailed surveys. Commercial publishers select and modify this information. Extra details are added, usually in colour. And as there is a high demand for town plans and guides, a selection is usually available of the same area. On all these products, the clarity of names is important, so that even small streets can be located. Not easy in some of London's West End areas. The user will interpret the map according to his own specific purpose. Some maps name locations, whilst others show symbols to emphasize a site or area. Besides locating famous historical landmarks, town maps and guides also enable the visitor and the resident alike to travel around. However, detailed travel information is often better obtained from specialized transport maps, for example, the London bus map. The London Underground map, first published over 50 years ago, is a splendid example of a schematic map. Schematic means detail being shown diagrammatically and not to scale. Note the simplicity and clarity of the information. Essential details are shown, lines, stations and interchanges, but little else. The rail traveller is probably more concerned with how long his journey will take. The schematic overground rail map tells him that his trip to Edinburgh should take 4 hours and 37 minutes. The historic city of Edinburgh is a popular place for tourists, and although many visitors arrive by train, many others come using a variety of transport modes. It doesn't take long for the visitor to Edinburgh to become aware of and accustomed to its special atmosphere and peculiar Scottish noises. One of the first tasks a tourist undertakes when visiting a new city is to orient himself using a map. That is, relating his position on the ground and on the map to major landmarks and places of interest. A tourist map, often an adaptation of the town plan, is designed to emphasize such locations by using symbols which can be referred to in the map legend, thereby helping identification and giving the fullest possible information. Major landmarks are naturally easy to locate on map and ground. In Edinburgh, the problem is choosing which one to visit first. Smaller places of interest may not be so easy to find, even after careful scrutiny of the map. Some locations are not named at all, though the legend may give some help depending on the type of place. The user wants maximum choice of attraction, but the map content must be limited to some extent. Mere indication of location may not give clues that a particular place is especially charming and has a number of picturesque views. Again, scale plays an important part in design, and different publishers portray the same area differently. A smaller scale map allows the village to be seen within its surrounding countryside. Similarly, map symbolization may give little feel for the actual appearance of a feature. The magnificent structure of the Forth rail bridge is not altogether apparent from the map. In some maps, it disappears altogether. On the other hand, the rail map not only omits the road bridge, but indeed all roads. Again, a function of data selection and purpose. Pictorial type symbols are increasingly used on maps. Some follow very closely those used throughout the world. This re-emphasizes the international flavor of many cartographic products. A single sheet may be translated into many languages. The symbol language remains the same. So far, we have considered local information. But what about further afield? Perhaps while browsing through an atlas dreaming of faraway exotic places, the words of Robert Louis Stevenson might be recalled. I am told that there are people who do not care for maps. I find this hard to believe, for here is an inexhaustible fund of interest for any man with eyes to see or tuppence worth of imagination to understand. Atlases may also vary in their purpose and coverage. A school atlas of the world. A reference atlas of a continent. A specialized atlas of a country. A particular division of the world. A town atlas of a city. All of these are affected by content and design. Special purpose maps following particular themes are also found in atlases. Statistics shown in a pictorial and quantifiable way illustrate many aspects of the physical landscape and society. The legend of this land use map demonstrates the many different types of information that have been collected by field surveys. Field surveys may also be used to compile population distribution maps. For example, the Census Office collects data from door-to-door surveys. This illustrates just part of the process of data selection, classification, generalization and symbolization, which integrates as a whole to produce an effective map. All maps show where, but as well as aids to moving about, they can also be used as important analytical and research tools. Cartography has entered the space and computer age. Indeed, many maps are drawn by computers. TV and video maps have emerged and could challenge the standard printed paper product. Cartography will continue to change and develop, and there will always be a map for every purpose.